Okay, here we go. Wednesday afternoon live draw with Comics Workshop. I'm Marek Bennett, www, three of them, marekbennett.com. And we're drawing today back in the Civil War in 1864. I've got a page I want to show you, and I'm working on a sequence I'm really excited about. So I'm going to zoom in on my desktop here. We'll just pull this up all the way. And here I've got my regular piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. I have a regular pencil with an eraser. I have my clipboard set up. I have some quotes I'm going to use today from some people I'll introduce you to in a moment. I have my clipboard set up with a 12 by 12 grid, and I've divided that into thirds and fourths so I can lay this over it and trace out any kind of panels that I want, and I'll show you how I do that. So I'm working today with a letter from a woman we introduced in the Civil War Diary of Freeman Colby, Volume 2, 1863. We introduced Nurse Sarah Lowe. All right, and actually I have a picture of her right here, an actual photograph of Nurse Sarah Lowe from New Hampshire. So here she is reading a letter from home, I imagine. She's taking a break from her medicines and her rounds, her attendance with her patients. And she's reading a letter. And I found a letter that she wrote back to her mother in New Hampshire. Let's see here. We'll go over here. This is going to be January 18th, 1864. And she tells the story of visiting. Well, I'll show you the story. So here's what I'm drawing. I'm taking her letters, her words, and I'm drawing them out. She says, at tea last Saturday evening, Miss Felton begged me, oh, please do come with us to the Capitol tonight. This is the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C. Miss Annie E. Dickinson is giving a lecture. Oh my, I've never heard a woman speak in public before. So these nurses are very excited to go to the U.S. Capitol and see Annie E. Dickinson give a lecture. So this got me really interested. I actually drew out a couple pages while I was waiting for this live draw to start. So they go to the Capitol. It's all quiet because everybody's gone in when they get there, and they get seats way up in the gallery, and they watch as Annie E. Dickinson is introduced. And that's what we're going to draw today. She's 21 years old, the first woman ever to address the U.S. Congress in their own hall here. And she gives the impression of being under some magical control. She has this ability to just mesmerize an audience and get them to listen for hours to her speeches. And she is quite an opinionated person, quite a speaker. So let's see. I have a photo over here. Here's Congress. I use that to draw the steps. Here's Annie E. Dickinson, Miss Anna E. Dickinson. She's an abolitionist and a feminist, an equal rights advocate, and quite an outspoken political speaker of her time. So, so let's jump right in here. I'll keep this right next to my page as I'm working here. I like to look my subjects in the eye and see what try to get a sense of what they might be like as I draw them. So we are going to draw from this scene. Let's see. So you can see how I laid this over my grid, and I traced out my third with the half line. I just traced that out here, thirds, 3 equal tiers across. And this one's with the half line. Vice President Hamlin was just introducing her. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you this war's Joan of Arc. So that actually wasn't in Sarah Lowe's letter here. She didn't actually mention what he said, but I found another quote that shows, here's a photo of Hannibal Hamlin. So I based this. He has that little tucked in chin beard under his collar there. So I based this picture here on this photo. And I think when all is said and done, I'll go in and I'll black in his frock coat here. So it's just pure black, but I'll do that later. First, I'm going to get the whole story down, and we're going to just pencil out a new page after this. So I found another source. All these people wrote about this event because this is an amazing event. This 21-year-old young woman who becomes the first woman to address the U.S. Congress here. So somebody else who wrote an account of this event said, well, Hannibal Hamlin compared her to Joan of Arc. And in another account, I found that after the war, they said she was called the Civil War's Joan of Arc. So I don't know if they used the terms the Civil War in 1864. You know, more likely he would have used the war between the states, or something like that, a more historic term from that period. The War of Southern Rebellion, that sort of term. So I changed it to just, I made him sort of, doesn't he look a little uncertain there? He looks like he might hesitate as he speaks. He's an interesting character. So Hannibal Hamlin just says, this war is Joan of Arc, and the clapping starts. All right, so she gathers her mesmerizing charisma. She gives the impression of being under some magical control. And on the next page, I only draw on one side of the paper because the ink, of course, bleeds through. So I'm not going to draw on the back. I'll put this aside here. I'll take a new sheet of paper and my pencil, and we'll just plan out the scene. So this is the moment when she starts to talk. And of course, I don't have her speech, but I looked up a couple quotes that the newspapers made. So I'm going to have her just, we'll use this quote about the Democratic Party, which is quite a shocking quote. And she'll just launch into it in this account. So let's see how I can see these grid lines here. I think if I went down to the third, I'd have a panel. I want a big splashy panel for her. Maybe she's going to be big in this panel and her words wrapped around her. That's not quite tall enough. If I go to the half, that's going to take up half the page. What if I go almost halfway to the half? So we'll go to this next line down. So I can use this grid to make sure all my panels have some kind of proportional relationship to each other. And it's not just eyeballing it. It's not just laying a ruler down and just eyeballing the panels. And you can see that on all my pages. Like this is half the page. This is a quarter and this is a quarter. So it all starts to feel like it has some kind of, proportional relationship. There's a balance to each page. And you can use these big ones, these big panels, to really call the reader's attention to an important detail in the story. And the small panels kind of move the actions along quickly. And I think in some of these panels, I may have tipped them or made them crooked. I don't see any here, but sometimes I think I do that when the characters are really crooked or falling over and whatnot. All right. So that's what we're creating here. This is a little bigger. This can be her quote from, well, let's lay it in here. So I have my quote. I wrote it down here. She said at some point in this speech, I'm just going to write it loosely to see how it fits. The Democrats are like, and if I go any lower, I'm not going to be able to fit a big Annie Dickinson in here. So maybe I can go like over to another. I'll break it up into different bubbles. That'll be, the Democrats are like, pause, the mass of revolting life. This is such a partisan quote from her speech. This will be like a rotten, revolting, wormy, sort of slimy kind of bubble here. Massive revolting life under a stone, she says. Under a stone, suddenly upheaved from its long resting place. This is an 1864 insult. Suddenly upheaved from its, whoops, no apostrophe there, long resting place. Now, I'm writing messily here, but I'm just penciling to see if the words will fit. I'll go back in when I ink, and I'll fix up that lettering a little bit more. Adjust my focus here. All right. Let's go back to, in our picture here, let's go back to Miss Dickinson. So she's going to be speaking here. The Democrats are like, and maybe there's like an arrow. You know how in Walt Kelly's Pogo, he used to have his Barnum spoof character who spoke with like circus language. We could even bring the Democrats. We could make it sort of curl like flagging. The Democrats. And remember, the Democrats in the 1860s, the Democratic Party, the political party was the pro-slavery party. So she is a radical Republican as an abolitionist and as an equal rights advocate. She's, of course, a radical Republican, and she despises the Democrats who are trying to compromise with the South in the middle of the Civil War. So here we go. We have room like right here to put a nice big speaking Annie Dickinson. Maybe her head comes up into the bubble like this. I'm giving her kind of a square head, wide open mouth. I think because she has like, she's under some magical control. I think I want to do her eyes like mesmerizing zero eyes that you stare at and you just have to listen to her as she speaks. I don't want her to look crazy, but I want her to look otherworldly. Her hair, I like how her hair kind of tumbles down over her ears. And maybe as she speaks, it goes off to the side a little bit. I imagine she could toss her head and make this hair, make these curls kind of tumble. And she's wearing a corset. So she's very thin-waisted and her skirts. I notice her sleeves too. That's how I drew her in the previous page. Thin-waisted, and the sleeves I actually doubled. That's very unusual for these stick figure characters. Most of my stick figures just have lines, but I kind of want to capture her fashion here. So let's see if we can do this. The corset will make her waist very thin. She has like a brooch there and then little buttons there. And what does she do with her arms as she speaks? The Democrats are like, maybe it's like she's lifting up disgusting, revolting life from beneath a stone. What if maybe this is a good one to have her like gesticulating as she speaks. Oh, I kind of like that. Yeah, I like having like, people won't think she's a mythical beast, I think. I think they'll see it as she's moving her arms around. We'll see. We'll see how it looks. I always let myself play with these panels. And if I don't like how it comes out, if it doesn't look quite right, I can redraw it. You know, this paper is really cheap. Okay, now I think this is a chance actually to have a smaller panel in here, 2 panels. So we'll do a panel all the way across. You notice how I went 3 sections down, so that's a quarter of a page. So we've gone from a little bigger than a third plus a quarter, 5/12 plus 3/12, and then we're going to have a third of a page left over for the bottom tier. But this one I'm going to break. I want to show 2 beats of the story. Now this isn't in Sarah Lowe's letter. Let me call up Sarah Lowe's letter here. Let's see what she said. So this is actually my transcription from the New Hampshire Historical Society. Where they've archived all her letters, I think, or all that we have in the archives. So Sarah Lowe says, we purchased our tickets for the gallery. It was in the House of Representatives and had the fortune to reach it just as Vice President Hamlin was introducing her. Doesn't say what he said. That was another source that said Joan of Arc. We got a very good seat where we could see both Miss Dickinson and the crowded audience. The mail has just come bringing a letter to me, which I must stop and read, and we'll skip that. She's writing home, so as she's writing this, she's interrupted by another letter. To return to the lecture, it interested the audience. It was, in fact, a stump speech. So this is a super political speech, right? For this young woman to come into the halls of Congress and make a campaign speech during the presidential election of 1864, that was noted by Sarah Lowe and many politicians. Very good of the kind. The whole scene was worth seeing and not to be forgotten. And so the president's there, the vice president's there, but she doesn't say what she said. So I want to show the audience, I'm thinking my imagination reads in that letter a reaction of the audience. So the way I'm showing the audience is like just all these different shaped heads. The hall of the House of Representatives in the US Congress is packed. And I don't want to get into drawing lots of details here. This isn't a scene where you'd like see all the details on every face. You know, if you were in the hall and you glanced at the audience, you would basically see a bunch of eyes and heads, right? You wouldn't necessarily see what type of collar this character had and what type of hair this character had. So I leave all that out, and this will just be the audience. Maybe like one big exclamation mark over them. And maybe we can use a little of Sarah Lowe's text. What if we say the whole scene? And in this one, was not to be forgotten. And I actually want to show the same part of the scene, the same aspect of this huge scene. Remember, we've set the scene on the page before, so I showed the audience. There's my bumpy head audience. There's Sarah Lowe up in the gallery looking down. And we've set this scene already, so I don't need to show the architecture. What I want to focus on here are the reactions of the crowd. Now, part of this crowd are radical Republicans who invited this young woman, Anna Dickinson, to come and speak and be the first woman to address the US Congress. Part of this crowd are the Democrats that she's attacking here. So let's have like some happy faces and some angry. People shouting at each other. And maybe like, yay, boo, hiss, clap, clap. I don't know if this is going to work to have these words so close. Oh, you know what we can do? When I ink this on the computer, I can blacken around the audience like that. So this will be like the air. This will be black with white writing. And this will be white air with black writing. Yay, clap, clap, boo, hiss, what? All these different responses. That's a little cramped, but well, at least hopefully it gives a sense of the audience. I can always come back and replace those panels if I decide I don't like it. Now, there's one other detail that I want to work in, and that's how she's speaking. I don't have her whole speech, but I want to use one big panel here to establish what she's talking about. And then I'll use the next page to do, Sarah Lowe says, President and Mrs. Lincoln were there. And that's basically all she says. We got home just as the bugler was putting the bugle to his mouth to sign the 9 o'clock call. So that's all she says of the whole event. But actually, I found some other quotes. Let's put this aside. I found some other quotes of topics she talked about, right? The equal rights for all people, regardless of ethnicity, full pay for all soldiers in the U.S. Army, whether they're in the U.S. colored troops or the main regiments of the U.S. Army, constitutional civil rights amendment. And then she goes after Lincoln himself as he's sitting in the audience. So Anna Dickinson, boy, she was courageous. So I think I want to set the scene here. And I also found, I'm combining a lot of different sources here. So we know Mark Twain wrote at like the peak of her career, he said of Anna Dickinson, she talks fast, uses no notes whatever, never hesitates for a word, always gets the right word in the right place, has the most perfect confidence in herself. So that's why she could come out and say these things to these legislators, right? So I think I can use maybe some of Mark Twain's words to give the reader a sense of how she speaks, and then we'll show what she's talking about. This will be as if Sarah Lowe is describing it. I combine a lot of my sources because no one source gives you enough information. So this is Sarah Lowe's words. The whole scene was a sight to be seen and was not to be forgotten. So she really remembers this and wanted to record it in her letter. And she would have seen this sort of thing. She talks fast. What did we say? Never hesitates for words. Uses no notes. And has the most perfect confidence. And then we'll put Miss Dickinson. Sarah Lowe said they built her a platform. that she could stand on. So we'll just put a platform going out here. We'll put her standing on it in the middle of this space, holding forth. So amazing. So the President of the United States, the Vice President, all these members of the House, the senators, the place is packed. And she, just a couple years before, she was a clerk in the Treasury and she was fired for speaking out. And now here she is, a couple years later, age 21, speaking where no woman had been allowed to speak in public before in the US Congress, in the Capitol. Let's put her topics in here. What did we say? She had, I wrote it down because I didn't want to have to print out a whole article. Negro rights. I'm using the terms of the time. She wouldn't have said really civil rights or African-American rights or Black Lives Matter. She would have said Negro rights, or that I think it was put the Negro should have equal rights as the white man or something like that. So I'm using a shorthand here. Equal pay for all soldiers. And at the time, African-American soldiers, or U.S. colored troops as they were called, hundreds of thousands of them in the Union Army, were not paid anywhere near what white soldiers were paid. And this was a huge point of contention. So she's speaking out to the powerful in the government advocating this. She is not mincing words. She also advocates for constitutional. Is that going to fit? I'll write it a little smaller. A constitutional amendment to ensure the rights of formerly enslaved people after abolition. That's not going to fit here. So I am going to use the more modern term civil rights, constitutional civil rights amendment. She would have to wait quite a while for that. And then like some noise coming off of the audience as people clap and cheer. Must have been quite a scene. So let's see, how's this going to read? A close-up of our character. Hopefully that's going to be clearly the audience, and now like moving back and describing and showing maybe more from Sarah Lowe's perspective, looking down at somebody far away speaking. Let's see how that looks when we ink it. So I like to go back sometimes. I'll go back to my pages before and I'll read through the whole sequence and look at how we came through architecture, came through setting the scene in right there in the House of Representatives. She takes a moment to, and like she's under some magical power, she just lays it all out, right? She just starts holding forth. All right, let's try it. Let's ink. So I can now put all my sources away, right? I can set those aside and I'll just focus on getting this page inked. So this is what really makes, I mean, this is all sketchy and scratchy and hard to see and hard to read. When you look in the book, it's all clean black and white because I've gone over the pencil lines or I've inked the whole page, right? And all of these started out as full-size papers like this, and then I shrink them down to go in the book, right? And that when I say I'm going to make like this black with white writing, it's going to look like these pages where I just invert the pixels once I get it on the computer. That's easy enough to do. So it won't look quite finished here. Let me take a moment to check. All right. Yep. If you want to make comments or ask questions, I will try to remember to check the comments every now and then as we're working here. All right, so now because I've penciled these borders out, I can now watch my edges carefully and maybe her voice can actually come outside the box of the panel a little bit. That's a nice way to kind of jump your characters out and make their voices really carry. It tells the reader's eye, hey, this is coming out towards you. It's really loud. She's projecting. Just like her head pops over the words there. I'm going to make the writing a little fancier here because she was a professional lecturer by this point in her life. At age 21, you know, she was bringing in thousands of dollars a night. All the money from this speech that they earned by selling tickets she donated to the Freedmen's Relief Fund for formerly enslaved people. I think I'm going to switch here to my chisel tip marker so we can really emphasize this word. Dim. I got to watch which lines I'm penciling here. I didn't erase my changes. The Democrats. She just despises Northern Democrats. She said we're cowardly. And Southern Democrats, of course, were the Confederacy. So she's probably more concerned with Northern Democrats in this speech. But at the time in 1864, she was saying, boy, yes, we've accomplished so much, but there's so much more work to do. Northern Democrats were saying, let's stop the war effort. Let's compromise with the South. Let's end the war, save a lot of lives, but maintain slavery and come up with some kind of two-state solution. And the radical Republicans were not having that. They saw that this would be like a betrayal of every sacrifice made over these past 4 years of fighting. This is like the little circus font arrow. The Democrats are like, the mass of revolting life. I'm going to change my handwriting a little bit as we go here. I think revolting life will be like horror lettering. Let's see if we can get sort of a horror letter fade or just make it awful. She's going to like curl her lip as she says this, revolting life, because I started to say she also fancied herself a bit of a thespian. After her lecturing career slowed down, she started doing plays, acting, went back to lecturing, did a lot of political speeches. I think because she was so outspoken, seems like she alienated a lot of people that she worked with and had some real troubles later in life. But I believe Annie Dickinson lived to be almost 90 or 90 years old, which is like, she would have been born 1842 because she's 21 in January 1864. That means she lived into the 1930s. What changes she saw, right? Amazing. Let's finish lettering these words. Then we'll do the whole panel border. The mass of revolting life. Maybe there's like creepy crawlies under here. Maybe this is like dripping. Ugh. I'll come back in and do more sort of graying texture to these words. Under a stone. Let's bring stone out. I get to sort of interpret how she might have spoken these words, and so do you as you read them, right? I imagine if she could hold thousands of people entranced for 2 hours at a time, she's not speaking in a monotone. She's not just chanting and reciting facts and figures. She's like acting them out, bringing it to life. A stone suddenly, well, let's shake these letters a little, up, heaved. She's probably like singing these words and acting them out with her body, I imagine, if she's under some magical power. From its long resting place. But she's also very precise, right? Very much in control. She's not, according to Mark Twain's take on her, right? She talks fast, uses no notes, whatever, never hesitates for a word, always gets the right word in the right place, has the most perfect confidence in herself. And he even went on to say, even if her arguments had no logical sense, she could probably convince at least a third of her audience of them. You know, interesting concept, huh? Unfortunately, very imaginable nowadays. But she has that charisma. And Mark Twain, you know, he knew public speaking, didn't he? He was at that time, or later on, he became really a public speaker professional as much as an author. So he knew what he was critiquing here. He knew the business. I'm not sure if that little bump is going to work or if it'll need to come through here or maybe across her arm here. I can adjust that later. That's an easy adjustment to make. All right, let's do this panel border. I'm going to tuck it behind the word bubbles here. My characters are stick figures, so they're super simple. What takes the time is figuring out what's the right flow, what's the pacing, the rhythm of the story. In this case, it's really hard because I'm using Sarah Lowe's letter, right? But this comes from another source. This is from Sarah Lowe's letter. This comes from Mark Twain's quote. This comes from another source of what she talked about. So I'm really, we have to find our own pacing and our own rhythm for the comic aside from Sarah Lowe's letter. When I started doing volume 1, I just stuck strictly to the diary. This is all just Freeman Colby's diary in order the way he told it. And that's easy in some ways, but I realized for volume 2, that doesn't give you the full story. So that's why volume 2 ended up being so thick, because this is a bunch of people's letters and diaries, trying to give you a little more of the full story here. Like there's probably a section here that only Fanny Dawson knew, and she could tell. Freeman Colby didn't know, but I have her come out as a character and tell that story. There she is telling it, right? So that's happening here. We have Sarah Lowe telling a part of the story, but we need to go to some other sources to flesh it out. Otherwise, we just get Sarah Lowe's letter. And to be honest, Sarah Lowe wrote a lot of letters, but she's also, if I pull her picture up here, a very, very busy nurse in the middle of a hospital, right? She has 100 or more patients she needs to take care of. So she's not going to write every detail. The whole scene was not to be forgotten. I think I'll do this line later when I scan this into the computer. I'll put a couple exclamation marks in here. I can always erase 1 or 2 of them. I might turn all these faces, since the audience would be a little darker. I might turn all these faces into black shadows with white lines around them. That might help it become more of a mass of people. I'll play around with it on the computer a little. We have a couple pages we need to scan in and play around with and format digitally. So that's probably the next live draw we'll do. Hey, if you want to help make this book, remember you can zip on over to the Patreon, become a patron, patreon.com/Marek Bennett. You can join at any level. You can join at a monthly level or annually. They have annual patronage now, so you can sign up for a year and get a special rate. That's how I'm doing these books now, is just by people helping out that way, helping us make these videos and reach more people. And we're also doing school visits this fall virtually. So I'll get a lot of comics drawn here at my desk. It's nice to be able to draw with you. And if you sign up on the Patreon, you actually get a little advance notice and invitations and things like that. And I'll post all these. Also, I'll post all my sources. So I have posted on the Patreon. If you head over there, you'll see there's a post. It says like Annie E. Dickinson sources, and it's got links to the different articles that I'm using to get all this information. I did a little research this weekend. Thought I'd draw a whole bunch of pages, but I ended up getting sucked into researching Annie Dickinson, which is pretty fun, pretty amazing to meet these people. And Sarah Lowe was there in Washington. She got to have front row seats or gallery seats to events like this. And she met, she went and shook hands with Lincoln at the White House. That's the other piece we were working on last week. And here she is at the Capitol, seeing the first woman ever to address the U.S. Congress. It was actually kind of mortifying for Lincoln because here's this radical Republican making a political speech in a campaign year on federal property. I mean, can you imagine? The past is so exotic and strange, right? No, it's amazing how things keep coming up again and again. Maybe some more emoticon lines here. Yeah, we'll see. Hey, hey. I don't know if that'll be readable when it shrinks down. We'll see. Let me just check our comments. You got any comments or questions? Feel free to comment them on the Facebookatron. Oh, let's not forget our Annie Dickinson here. I don't want her hair to make her look too crazy here. So I think what I'll do is I'll tone it down a little. It's really like carefully combed, and I'll give it some curls so it looks a little less desert islandy. I don't think, like Mark Twain's account kind of implies, she was very much in control. She wasn't some romantic screamer, right? I want her to look like she's in a trance or something. Okay. Oh, I am going to have to tuck her dress behind that sleeve because the sleeves, unusual for this stick figure book, actually have thickness to them. I like those simple doubled lines. I like thinking, you know, if you draw these stick figures and they're kind of symbolic, but then if somebody goes and actually looks at the photograph, they'd recognize certain details that you worked in, right? Certain little details. Don't want to put too many details in, but I want it to be recognizable. And right at the point of recognizability, that's where I'll stop putting details in. Okay. The many arms of Miss Annie Dickinson. Wonder how she used her arms. Maybe, you know, if she was under a magical power, she could have stood very still and spoken her speech. Who knows? But I think it's more exciting to draw her gesticulating. Let's actually bring some shadows into the corners here. I'll just do this automatically inking. But that'll help bring out the space a little more, I think. You never know. Got to try it out. And that would be shadowed in here. That also helps it look like it's kind of tucked behind her word bubbles. There we go. Boy, that is a complicated panel for Freeman Colby. I mean, most of these panels, I don't do that level of tucking in. I keep all the parts separate more. But it's good to sort of walk through that and see how that looks. Now, when I erase it, we'll see how it looks. Let's do one more panel, and then that'll be it for now. I don't know how this will work, just a block. But let's see. Don't do a lot of block text. I think the dog is opening the door and coming in. She talks fast. Let me close this door. Hold on a sec. Okay, she talks fast. Uses no notes. This is written a little larger than it needs to be. I may revise this panel, but let's get something down just so we have something for this page. And has the most perfect confidence. I can see Sarah Lowe, who's at this point, I believe, in her late 20s. She's getting older as a single woman in 1864. And I could see her watching this speech and absorbing. She's in her letters, she's absorbing so much from this chance, this front row seat on history she has in Washington, D.C., which I don't know if she had that growing up. I mean, she has in her family is Senator John Hale, New Hampshire senator, but she's never lived in a place like this before, I think, where she can go on an evening when she's done with work, she can go across the mall, across the canal to the Capitol and see history being made. Equal pay. See, my inking comes apart from my penciling a little. Penciling is just to show me basically where things go. But I can switch it up and smush it around as I go a little bit. Let's put a bubble around that. I think this will be black background, white bubbles. Constitutional, I have to squish constitutional a little bit because it didn't quite fit. I'm going to have to patch that. I wonder if I moved it up a little. Let's try patching it. I'll show you what I mean by patching it. Something doesn't quite work there, we can fix it. If constitutional is too long, we could make it say Civil Rights Amendment to the Constitution. Constitution's a little shorter, but let's see if we can make this one work. So I'm going to take a piece of, well, first I'm going to erase all around here. Get rid of the pencil lines. And I'm going to take a piece of scrap paper. And we're going to fix that. We'll go right into the corner of that panel, like so. And we'll try to fit Constitution one more time right where it needs to go. That fits a little better. Let's do the whole bubble. Oops. I'll fix that in when I scan it in. That's a little dark for an N, huh? And we'll do the bubble around the words. I always do the words first and then the bubble. That's how you know it's going to fit. If you do the bubble first, it never fits. So now I can come in here and cut this out. Close to the lines, but not right on them. And it's going to fit. Look at that. It fits right over there. Come in here with a glue stick. That N is bothering me, I know, but I can hopefully fix it with some whiteout. If I take extra hours to make every single thing perfect, I'll never get the page done. I'll feel bogged down. I won't be able to finish the project. So sometimes little mistakes like that, I'm like, okay, each page is going to have its imperfection, at least one major imperfection, right? And I'm okay with that if you can still read the story. And if there's time, I'll come back and fix that. She's just making arguments for everything, huh? Simple dress. I think this will be a black background. with maybe like a white circle around her. So she's like in a spotlight, then all black head shapes around her. So I won't even do any details. You can't see faces when you're in the crowd looking at the backs of heads. So we'll just do a bunch of different shapes. And hopefully that'll look like a jumble of lots of men and women, legislators, nurses, soldiers, everybody who gathered, listening to her speech, shouting cheers and jeers. My goodness, what a scene. And it really mortified Lincoln, because to be making a political speech when she was supposed to be, what was she supposed to be speaking about? Women's rights and abolition. And she wasn't supposed to make a campaign speech, a stump speech. Sarah Lowe says it was in fact a stump speech, and it was quite good, right? She says that in her letter. That gives us a clue of where her politics lay, maybe, because she thought it was great. This is the, I'm just jury rigging a little platform. Sarah Lowe said in her letter they had made a platform for her to walk back and forth on as she spoke. So maybe that's not looking quite right to me. Maybe I'll just gray that in like this, lots of little lines. And then the heads will all be black, and the background will be black. We'll see how that looks when we scan it in. All right, so we have penciled and inked a page. Remember our system. To share your work, you got to share your pencil, ink, erase artwork. So that means once we've penciled and inked, we're going to come back here and erase. And look at how those messy words, where you can hardly read it because there's so many lines, pencil lines getting in the way. I come in here and I erase, and the ink stays, and the pencil lines hopefully disappear. Oh, I wanted her mouth to be, yeah, I think that mouth has to be black, so your eye is drawn to it as a loud, open mouth, opinionated speaker. Wonderful moment, amazing moment. I mean, she's not making any friends, and she had apparently a difficult interview with Lincoln later. But she's not making any friends with the moderate Republicans. But I think she's delivering what the radical Republicans, that is the abolitionists and equal rights advocates and free soil people, and the radical Republicans wanted her to come in and make a fiery speech like this to rile up the base. And at the time, I think there was talk at the time of dumping the incumbent president from the presidential campaign. And some people were fielding Treasury Secretary Salmon Chase, right, as the 1864 Republican candidate, saying, well, Lincoln's a failed president, get rid of him. And Lincoln, if I'm correct, I think Lincoln ran on a separate party, not the Republican Party ticket, right? He ran as a Liberty Party candidate, but it was basically the Republican Party. All right, I'll just keep erasing here, finish this up. I'll scan it in. I will drop the finished artwork. I'll post it to the Patreon. If you want to head over there, join up. You can see the results. You'll see my process. You'll get invitations for the next live draw. We'll be drawing a whole lot. There's so many adventures. Oh, careful, erasing around that patch. There's so many adventures happening in the Civil War, so I'll be drawing a lot of those. Although you never know, our next live draw might be a spaceship live draw. We'll see. Let me call up my, check the comments. Barney says, the best Marek I know. Aw, Barney. It's not a competition between Mareks, though, that you know. Well, thanks for dropping by, folks. Nice to draw with you on a Wednesday. Thank you for helping me get a page done. Oh, let's check in on, just a minute. Let's check in on our Freeman-Colby Volume 3 progress chart. We have to update this. So when last we met on Friday, we had just reached our 2-page-a-day line with a burst of 5 pages in a single day. And as always, let's see, Saturday, I realized I actually dropped a couple days. I didn't have a 19th here, but that's fine because I didn't draw anything that day. And Sunday, I didn't get anything drawn either. But Monday, I got 3 pages drawn. So that would bring us up to right here on the 21st, 21, up to here. So actually it goes up like this. And then yesterday I got 2 pages drawn. So that would bring us for the 22nd, that'll bring us 2 pages up, getting closer to that line. And today, this is my 2nd page drawn. So let's bring it up for the 23rd. We'll bring it up to 1, 2. Oh, we're just below that 2 pages a day line. Maybe if I draw another page, we'll reach it today. We'll see what I get done this afternoon. But that always happens. If I have one day where I finish a lot of pages, then the next day or two, I find I'll be so burnt out that I won't get much done. But we'll put a little push in this afternoon or this evening. Try to get one more page done. That's how I keep track of my progress. Make sure the whole book, by the end of the year, I want to have a volume 3 ready to go. So that's going to take a lot more work here. All right. Thanks for your help. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Check out the Patreon for the final artwork. And maybe we'll do a little video processing some of these pages soon, as soon as possible. And thanks a lot, patrons, for making this possible. And I will sign off. Good night, everybody. How do you stop this thing?